Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our TGT podcast, our weekly series. I'm joined by a few guests to talk about the week's events. And usually, well, what this season has pretty much been, this has been your therapy show, your free dose of therapy as Arsenal fans. And we get to continue that form after Arsenal lost 1-0 to Manchester City yesterday. And I'm going to be joined by three wonderful people to break it down, to see if we should actually be as mad as some people feel we should be. And maybe we end up feeling better by the end of it. Maybe we won't. We'll see what happens. Let's crack on with it. Hello, people. I'm joined by, first of all, French. How are you doing, mate? Are you well? Are you happy, healthy?
Yeah, I'm all good, man. All right. Still went for a nice long walk this morning. Enjoyed some of the blue sky. Yeah, I'm
all right. Is that because of Arsenal? Like, I need to get out the house.
No, I'm just getting a bit outdoorsy at the moment. I'm getting back to my kind of like nature boy ways. So, yeah, I've just been enjoying that. I've got a new fishing rod on the way, so yeah, I'm going to be casting that out soon. And yeah, doing my
very nice. I did not have you down as a fisherman, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I prefer spearfishing. It's a bit more dynamic, but in England, you can't really do them things. I like hunting generally, so do what I can do.
Okay, fair. You learn something new every day. Fair play, French. Moving on to our next guest, it's the man who I'm expecting will see quite a few comments in the chat box about his headwear. It's Drew. How you doing, mate? You well?
Good. I was going to say, I think if whenever the apocalypse comes, I think French is more suited than anybody else is going to be out there spearfishing. And then we're all screwed. French will be fine. No, I'm good. Yeah, I think a lot of us are kind of in the same headspace about yesterday. So, but no, I'm good. No other complaints about that. Other than if this is therapy, I'm the worst therapist. So don't ask me for therapy.
We got you on here on purpose. This is for your benefit too. This is why you're here.
I must be it. So there you go. Thanks for having me as usual.
No problem at all. And finally, making up our fantastic panel of guests, it's Adam. How you doing, mate? You well?
Yep. Hi, my name's Adam. I'm an alcoholic, Arsenal fan. I don't know which one's worse. Man. I don't know. Yeah, no, I'm good though. I'm good.
I genuinely thought you were introducing yourself seriously for a second. I was like, I'm sure I just did that for you. Deary me. Oh, it's going to be one of those days, I feel. We're going to get through it, though. We're going to talk about it all. We might end up feeling a bit better. I mean, I've got a beer for the show because, frankly, I thought I might need one. Adam definitely doesn't because he's come for an AA meeting. But other than that, hopefully we can get through the next hour or so and get some of your questions answered by the end of it as well. We will kick off the show, as we always do, with our raw reactions to the result. Adam, I'm going to go reverse order and start with you, mate. Were you expecting to lose this? And if so, do you feel expectantly kind of disappointed or accepting of it? How do you feel?
Strangely, I didn't go into the game thinking we were going to lose. Or even expecting to lose. I don't know if that's just naive optimism or the fact that I haven't been paying enough attention to Arsenal recently. But yeah, I was quite surprised to hear people say that they were happy that we didn't lose 4-0 or 5-0. I was really surprised. And I guess in doing streams and analyzing the game, people have said that it could have been worse. City should have been 2 or 3 up in the first couple of minutes. And I guess I've come around to their way of thinking. I guess it's a sign of where Arsenal is and where we are. And I probably just need to get on board sooner rather than later, which is a bit unfortunate. But yes, I'm not surprised we lost. I didn't expect us to lose. Yeah, although I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think there's a lot of people. I mean, Saturday, and the amount of people that were predicting like draws and wins, like people were hopeful going into this. It is maybe it's the channel. We're very optimistic here. Maybe it's that, but I still thought when I went into the game, like, okay, I'm ready for this. Like, I tweeted out in the morning saying, like, I just want to see a performance. I'm not like the result is secondary, but because of how expectant we are not to get anything from this game, I just want to see a good performance, a performance which kind of has encapsulated how we have battled against some of the top 6 sides under Arteta. And Drew, this result was kind of different because we weren't like the Arsenal I've seen under Arteta against big 6 sides. And while Man City were able to win this 1-0, it wasn't like, oh, great, we only lost by 1 goal, because we never looked like really getting back into it.
Yeah. It's tricky because I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as to where, for me, all I wanted to see was, again, I wanted to see a performance. I wasn't worried about the result per se, because I did not come in going into this thinking we were going to win. I mean, and that's not to say that City are that far ahead, even though they are, because we do have the ability to turn up against bigger sides under Arteta and maybe put in that performance that we're talking about, but we didn't get it. And I think, for me, that's where I was disappointed. I was fine with losing as long as we looked like we actually wanted to try and go and get something, but we didn't. And for me, my bigger concern is, and I mentioned this on the Yama podcast, is that competitions and matches string themselves together. You know, we weren't great in the first leg against Benfica, let's be honest, but we were okay, but we weren't great. And then now we put in that performance against City, and now we're going into another Benfica performance where we need a win, and we're coming off the back of 2 subpar outings. Sometimes those things string themselves together. Just because they're in different competitions doesn't mean that your form magically doesn't translate. Like, there's not some magical barrier as to where we can be brilliant here, but we're garbage here. You know, a lot of times it does string themselves along. So for me, that's what my concern was. I was, you know, if we lost 1-0 and we actually had chances, legitimate chances throughout the match, and we looked like we put about ourselves just a little bit better, I think a lot of fans maybe would have taken that. But when you look at the XG, I think our XG was 0.33. There you go. Like, I mean, that's it. We had 1 decent chance all match, 1. And so for me, it just seems like, I think maybe not just Arteta, but the players as well. Maybe I think they were all looking more towards Benfica instead of that match. And yeah, you can say that we're out of the race for top 4, most likely. You know, Europa League, we'd have to go on a serious run and hope that others ahead of us keep dropping points. But you still want to do as best you can in the league. Again, because things are connected. If you start absolutely tanking in the league, it's likely that you're not going to magically not do the same in Europa League. So you still have to put in some sort of outing domestically to make sure that you can keep some level about you, so you can keep bouncing back and forth between the pair, unless you're having some different plan that we don't know about. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sad about it. I wanted to see more, but I don't think it's doom and gloom. I don't think the club should explode, tomorrow because we didn't win. You know what I mean? But there's some fans out there acting like we just lost 1-0 is the worst thing in the world. But I think it's got to be somewhere in the middle. No one wants to lose, but you do want to see more when you do lose, and we didn't see more when we lost. I think for me, that's the biggest problem personally.
French, I saw you nodding along furiously with Drew there. I'm assuming you feel very kind of similar to how he's feeling, but how do you feel about the reaction, I guess, to the defeat? Because it was heavy. Like, it was, I don't know the best way to kind of script this, because as I said to Adam to kick off the show, like, not many of us expected too much in terms of like a result. And yet afterwards there was like, oh, look how far off we're City. And I'm sitting there in a bit going, yeah, we're miles off City, because we haven't been able to match City in the last like 5 years. And every year they've got a little bit further away from us again, or a lot further away from us again. But I was more frustrated at kind of the performance than anything. And do you think there was maybe an eye on the Europa League game on Thursday, and maybe the players were thinking about that? Or was it just a simple case of we conceded really early and any game plan we had just went out the window?
Okay, all right. I think you asked me 2 questions there, so I'm going to start with the first one. The first one was about like the reaction of the fans, or the reaction to the game, being maybe like, is it a bit over the top or whatever, based on what expectations were. For me, I completely understand it, but I think it's not really so much about the game as everything else around it. Like our league position, the fact that I think it's now 11 losses, so more losses than wins. I feel like if we were, in the top 4, like kind of conversation and we were doing well, a 1-0 loss to City wouldn't have quite the same meltdown as it's had. And I understand that because everything comes with context. So it's, for me, it's a build-up of things that, you know, they get released. And it's the way that we lost as well. It's not really just the fact that we lost. I do think that initial, I mean, I've spoken about it on the last show. I think it was after the Villa game, when we kind of give away the game through a lack of concentration within the first few minutes by letting in a goal. It completely changes how you look at the game, how the game is played. It's very hard to kind of analyze tactics at that point because, you know, did we just have the ball because they had a 1-0 lead and they are very good at defending and they could just sit back and let us have it. So that really frustrates me. And I do think for me, I think that is probably the biggest thing from Arteta's point of view, from what turned the game. I don't think he threw the game with his selection. I don't think, you know, obviously rotation is important and he couldn't play the same players that he played against Leeds and Benfica twice and against City. Some players had to change. But with the players that got put in, I don't feel like it was a concession kind of lineup. I thought, like Adam mentioned, I thought we might get something out of the game, to be honest. Even the day before, when I saw the lineup, I was like, right, we've got some good players. I like the look of that front four. You know, maybe we can do something. Obviously, we didn't do anything, but I don't think he threw the game. Maybe the players, you could say they had an eye on Thursday. It's kind of hard for me to quantify that sort of thing. So for me, I just look at what we did on the pitch and that kind of initial error and the way that kind of told the story of the rest of the game. But even saying that, I mean, so at the end of the first half, I wasn't particularly upset. I don't know how you guys felt after that first 45 minutes. I was terrified after the first 5. Didn't know what was going to happen. It could have been 5-0. You know what I mean? It looked like it was going to be one of those. And then after those initial 5 minutes, I think the commentator said at 44 minutes, we haven't let them have a shot on goal from those first 5 minutes. So for 40 minutes of the first half, we didn't let them play through us. And this is a team that, they are on their 18th now win in a row. And a lot of them haven't been 1-0s. They've been 3-1s, So I don't want to say, yeah, at least we didn't do that. But the fact is we didn't, I don't think we rolled over and showed our belly. You know, I think we did all right. We kind of stayed in the game. There might have been some sort of pre-match agreement to just keep it at 1-0 and not really embarrass his mate. But, you know, Pep didn't want to embarrass his friend Arteta. But I don't know. For me, I feel at halftime I was kind of not too mad. But yeah, let me know what you guys think.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, things rolling over on their bellies, leave spearfishing out of this. Keep it to where it belongs. but secondly, I kind of feel like, and it'd be good to get everyone else's thoughts as well, but Pep Guardiola's sides are both notorious and experts at not turning in the gears when they don't have to. When you go 1-0 up inside 2 minutes, it forces the opposition to take the match to you. And if you do, then Pep sides can also transition and become a counterattacking side very easily. They didn't have to really go through the gears today. And they do have eyes on Champions League this week. They have Gladbach, who aren't in great form, but Marco Rose is a very good manager and they have a capable side to look forward to. So if they could rest themselves, even the players that put in 90 minutes, did they really put in 90 minutes? Not really. I think they put in kind of like the body equivalent of a 45-minute period. They really look like they got the goal and then they put the car back in the garage and they just kind of went back home again in a way. Do you know what I mean? So I don't necessarily, you could take that, we didn't get battered. Other teams have played City and gotten battered. Liverpool got battered. Everton lost recently by multiple goals. But I think those are also teams that actually forced City to take the match back to them because they were willing to go ahead and play and try to get something from it. I don't think that we particularly ever really challenged City at any point, other than the first goal. I mean, other than our one chance that we managed to craft, maybe 1 or 2. But so I don't know what you guys feel, but
I don't doubt that they could have turned up, several more gears at the kind of flick of a switch. I think even if they hadn't scored that initial goal in the first 5 minutes, that doesn't mean then that we would go on to necessarily, the way they're playing at the moment, that is just what they're doing to all teams. And like you said, maybe if we'd managed to score a goal, I don't think, by the way, I'm not fully on board with what you guys are saying in terms of we didn't create anything. We didn't have the end product or the ball before the ball, but I did think we were creating attacking movements to a certain degree of consistency.
The end of the first half was good. Like, I thought it was good at the end of the first half.
We had moments.
Yeah, I mean, I went into half time thinking, okay, if this carries on, like if we keep passing the ball out to Tierney and Saka on the left, or we try to get these balls into the box, we might get a decent chance. But I was so let down by the second half that it was like, what happened at half time?
So now I'm thinking like there are some individual performances as well that I don't really want to hammer people or anything like that. But for example, like Tierney was clearly pretty off the pace. You know, he kept putting him in positions and he kept not being able to deliver across. You know, he started to warm up more as the game went on. But there are a few players on the pitch you could pick out. Bellerin had a very poor game in terms of linking up on the right side. Pepe wasn't great either. Odegaard, you know, not very good. So, but a lot of these things were things you expect them to be good at. So like, for example, Odegaard was kind of maybe misplacing some sort of passes, some through balls that we all know he can do, but he just seems to not quite have it there yet. So I feel like there are some kind of individual things that went wrong to make that happen. But I think tactically, I don't think it was a complete wash. That's what I'm trying to say, by the way. It's not to say that, oh, at least we didn't get battered. It's more to say that tactically, I think we were trying to do something. I could see it going somewhere, but I just don't think we're quite there yet. And some players were off the pace as well.
Adam, one of the big questions that a lot of people are asking in the chat box is why, if we were going to play Saka and Pepe, did they play on the sides that they did? There's arguments to say that Saka was on that side protecting Tierney with Cancelo and the role that he was playing. I understand that. I get that. That's absolutely fine. Tactically, it makes sense and it worked. Before everything after the first 25 minutes, it kind of worked. Mahrez was having an absolute field day for the first 25 minutes. But if you're going to play Saka on the left, don't put Pepe in the one position where he has been ineffective for 90% of his time there. Well, no, that's too harsh. But especially this season, 90% of this season, he has been pretty ineffective on the right. And yet we've seen on the left how good he can be. If you're going to play, I'm not going to answer the question for you, but why do you think Arteta chose, or is there any reason, and was it a mistake?
It has to be tactical, because I think I've seen some of Pepe's harshest critics in recent weeks say that he's actually been good on the left. So I can only think that he did it for tactical reasons. And as you say, I hadn't even thought of the fact that it could have been to protect Tierney. I thought maybe he thought that they were the wingers that we had on each wing or each side would have been able to attack their marker better. I don't know. But I think it's safe to say that it was a mistake. And I also think that it's one of the things that we can look at Arteta with scrutiny for and say, well, we know that certain things don't work. We know that certain things look better when you do X. So why do you continue to do some of the things that we know don't work? So yeah, I really don't know. And it worries me that we rely so much on a teenager who is going to have inconsistent periods, who is going to have patchy performances at times. And I'm also worried that, I guess, for the long-term future of Arsenal, that Bukayo Saka is going to burn out at some point. We've seen it happen to some of the greatest players in the game, and I'm assuming that Saka is going to sort of stay at Arsenal for his entire career. But we've seen players like Rooney, whose legs have gone at like 30, when others have gone on to play well into their 30s. And I look back at their start of the careers and I wonder if that's the reason why they played too much when they were young. So yeah, I think there's all that to contend with. And I think Arteta really needs to sort of think about these things a bit more carefully. I'm saying it like he doesn't. But I guess just even to give us an explanation, I think would help appease me, certainly. So I know, okay, you didn't get it right, but at least I understand you're thinking a little bit more. Because right now it just looks like he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah. It frustrates me because I've several times and defended some of the decisions, but I couldn't defend a lot of what was done in that game. Even with like thinking about Thursday, I mean, I was on with Jess earlier on. If you want to check out Jess's channel, you can find her at Jessinho on Twitter. She knows Arsenal, and we were talking about how like the decisions that were being made for Thursday, if you want to play a strong team, why play Saka for 90 minutes? Like, why not give him a rest? Why not take him off? Why not bring Martinelli? Because the thing about Martinelli, he's barely played. If you want to add injection of energy, surely Martinelli's like this bundled ball of excitement that can get onto the pitch and press and try and win tackles and win balls back. It just frustrates me. French, I know you want to come in on this, so do you want to go for it, mate? Muted.
To say about the Saka Pepe switch, and I suppose also going on to rotation and that sort of thing. But I mean, I saw a lot of people say that it was he was put there to mark Cancelo, who's obviously not just running at Tierney, but is kind of playing an entirely free role. Essentially, he's just kind of going everywhere on the pitch and turning up in the box and doing all sorts of madness everywhere. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the thing that Pepe doesn't track back. But I do understand that, Saka has played as a defender or in a back line, at least previously. And maybe Arteta would think, he's going to be slightly more switched on to be able to mark him. I'm not saying that it worked or that it was, genius or anything like that. But I can kind of understand where that is. With the rotation thing, I think he did. Did he address it after Benfica? Did he say something in his press conference about we need to manage his minutes, I think?
Oh, mate, he might have done. I can't remember off the top of my head.
And then he played him again 90 minutes in the weekend. So there you go. But I think he had a bad game against City, to be honest, by his standards. I think he made a lot of poor decisions. He was still our best player on the pitch. So it's one of those ones where, I think I completely understand in terms of burnout. I worry about it a lot as well. I think all fans do. I mean, we've seen it even with more recently with people like Bellerin. Had all the pace in the world, couple injuries after maybe being played too much, too young. And so we all worry about it. And I think it's completely understandable. But the one way I kind of just reassure myself is that I'm not a sports scientist and I don't have the information on him to say, and their jobs are ultimately riding on people like Saka doing well. You know what I mean? So I think I would hope the people around him are as invested in, and the other thing is Arteta is not going to be sacked like this season, I don't think. So he's not under that kind of pressure where his job's on the line to play him every game. I think if he's playing him every game, I would hope it's because he can play every game right now. And he's just in that sort of form where you can't drop him. So that's just where I kind of console myself with that. But I understand the fear. I've got it as well.
I want to talk about a topic that I don't really want to talk about necessarily because it's not very nice. And that's the Premier League table. I was doing the watch along with Hugh during the game, and me and Drew have sat here and talked about the context of Arsenal and where we are and what we can expect realistically. I mean, from French, we sat here on Tuesday and talked a bit about that as well. But Drew, we are 10th, and I know that there's obviously the context of points. Being the host, I want to play devil's advocate and, of course, bring this point of view up. Because when I was talking and using the kind of theories that we've talked about on here about where we are, what we can expect, what has happened this season, some of the bad things haven't gone our way. But I do look at some clubs that are above us, obviously the likes of Aston Villa with 2 games in hand. West Ham is a big one with the season that they are having. Is there a solid argument, in your view, that another coach could be getting more from this squad of players right now? I just want to put the question to you because people will turn to me and say that on paper, do West Ham have a better squad than us on paper? And it's hard for me to argue that they do. I had a strong stab at trying to say that Everton, man for man, have a very decent squad and quite an underrated squad. But West Ham, it's more of a struggle, and that they've got David Moyes in charge. So what do you take? What do you make of this argument?
I think I think Arteta's in a tricky position. And I kind of want to mention something that you and Jeff spoke about on the podcast that you guys did earlier. And was that, or was it you and Jess, or was it the guest after? And they were talking about how Arteta is spending a lot of time giving directions.
Yeah,
to the players. Yeah, that was Owen. And James. Was it James? Yeah, Owen and James. They were talking about it, and they were saying Arteta spent a lot of time giving instruction to the players. And yet Pep doesn't say much like he used to. And that's indicative of a club and a side and City that have a fully embedded system under Pep, and he doesn't have to give constant instructions anymore. The players know what they're doing. With Arteta, we're maybe 50, 60% of the way there in theory to where he wants to be from a tactical standpoint and from a system standpoint, being embedded in the team. So it might be hard for him to try to focus on getting the best of every player every week when he's still trying to nail down how he wants the club to play overall. So that's a difficult balance that he has to strike for me. And it's, when you're looking at other sides like Michael Leeds when they were performing early in the season, like Villa under Dean Smith, and then you have David Moyes West Ham that are in contention for Champions League, which blows my mind. But I think these are all sides that were built in mind specifically for that manager, and their systems are easier to implement. Villa do not play complicated football. West Ham don't play complicated football. Leeds, more tactically complicated, I think, which is why I think Bielsa wants certain players and he doesn't want certain players. But you're looking at teams that are performing at their absolute past 100%, 105, 110%. They're like, I don't know if you
okay. Let me jump in very quickly, Drew, because I want to pick up on that point, because I knew that you were going to, because this is something that I've talked about, and we said that like Everton are at 100, like they're working at the maximum. But the argument would be is that Ancelotti is getting the maximum out of Everton, and that David Moyes is getting the maximum out of West Ham. So what's the counter to that for Arsenal's situation? Why isn't Arteta then getting the maximum out of what we've got?
Well, again, I kind of feel like you're looking at clubs that, like Arteta's had to come in and again, he's trying to weed out. And I hate kind of using this, but I think he's trying to weed out what players really work for him. I think Ancelotti had an easier job figuring that out. And then they bought a whole new midfield specifically to fit what Ancelotti wants to do at Everton, as an example. Dean Smith already knew the majority of his players at Villa, except they got 2 or 3 really good additions to accentuate the squad. And then he kind of maybe played slightly more expensive, but they're still very much a more direct team. They just play at pace. They create a lot of chances. West Ham, I think, is the anomaly, but I feel like West Ham are like at 115%. If you look at that squad, there's no way that's a Champions League, like a top 4 squad in the Premier League, considering the teams in and around them and below them. And there's, I don't know whoever in the chat or if you guys have ever seen Hunt for Red October, but there's that period where the Soviet submarine captain's like, well, I want to know if we can go to 105% on our reactor. And the guy's like, well, we can, but I wouldn't recommend doing it. You can get the maximum out of a team only for so long. You can go past 100% only for so long, and eventually that will peter out. And sometimes you'll go back to 100 or you'll go below that. And I think those are the kind of sides who they might overachieve this year, but it's hard to look at those teams and say they'll overachieve every single season, or even if they'll overachieve for the rest of this season. Eventually, you hope they burn out, and even if they don't, I'd rather, it's something that I was thinking about the other day, is I would rather continuously try to up our percentages incrementally over time so we can get to 100% and stay at 100%, rather than hoping we get to 105 or 110% quickly and then it burn out and then we're screwed and back to square one again. And that's when you get things like managerial rotations and sacking, because you overachieve, expectations rise, then you drop down considerably, you hit a big wall, and everyone's like, well, it's not working anymore, sack the manager, and then you sack the manager. I don't want to do that. I'd rather be at 75 than 80 than 85 than 95 than 100 and stay at 100. And you kind of feel like that's kind of where maybe Liverpool were under Klopp, and I think they're burning out this season not because they can't do it, but they're burning out because they don't have depth and they haven't purchased, and they were hoping that injury bugs didn't happen. Liverpool didn't have any injury concerns when they won the league last year, and now they're getting ripped apart with injuries, and now you see what happens. So their issue is squad depth. It's not about they can't perform for Klopp. It's hard to perform when so many key pieces aren't available so much of the time. So I think that for me is the difference. So I think maybe in the short term a manager could be getting more. You could have maybe like a Tuchel effect that he's relatively had on Chelsea overall, even though they're still kind of inconsistent. Or you could look and hope to say, if we're trying to build long term with a manager, that long term you're seeing incremental growth that I think we have seen overall under Arteta, as opposed to I want immediate, restitution tomorrow, and then maybe I'll get it in the season after that. And if not, then we'll just fire and hire somebody else. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. Adam, I know you want to come in on this, mate.
Yeah, it was similar to what Drew was saying. I just think the motivations for the managers that you mentioned is different. I don't think Carlo Ancelotti's remit when he came in was to transform the club. I don't think that's the same thing at David Moyes either, because they don't have that power and they never will. And I think it's exemplified by the fact that Mikel Arteta's role changed from head coach to manager. Now his remit is to not only have an impact on the squad, the playing squad, but on the club as a whole. And I think because he has that motivation as well, it makes his job that little bit harder. It means that there's just a little bit more for him to do. Whereas I don't think Carlo Ancelotti or David Moyes have that in their job description.
French? Mute.
Great points by both.
That's two strikes.
Yeah. Great points by Drew and Adam there. I'll just make a really quick point to add on to Drew's. I think in a few isolated games, Arteta was able to coach 100% out of the squad that he had in something that was ultimately unsustainable. The three at the back in the FA Cup run was fantastic. It worked really well. We looked better than Manchester City in that 2-0 win. We all thought, this is it. Yeah, we can just pop the ball around from the back, around every team, give it to Aubameyang, and it's going to work every time. I think maybe our time in the sun was not as long as, a lot of other clubs were, for whatever reason. I think maybe because the team just was never at that stage. And it was always kind of in need of a rebuild at this point. It was so it just really didn't last any time at all. But we kind of saw what happens where, you get 100% out of them, but ultimately it doesn't last. And it's better to try and do something over time. And I think that's what happened. We went back to a square one. We looked horrible for a while. And now I think what we're building is more sustainable.
I agree. There's a couple in the chat box. I want to highlight, obviously, comments which are questioning what we're talking about. Yonic Max says, but are we even improving incrementally right now? And on the surface, I was saying on the surface, it's hard to see that because I know that the barometer, everything, you can go for all the statistics of a game, but at the end of the game, there's only one stat that matters, and that's the scoreline. And for some people, it's the same kind of thing with the league table, is that you can talk about what's happening on the pitch, behind the scenes, whatever, but what ultimately really matters is where you are in the table. In the short term, I think that theory and that argument has a lot of weight to it, but in the long term, it's very, very kind of small percentage of things, because where a team is one season is going to be completely different based upon where they gradually move to. You look at the way Leicester have gradually built themselves up again from their league title win. They then dropped back down after obviously losing Ranieri, going through the Claude Puel kind of period, and then got in Brendan Rodgers and have gradually built themselves back up again with some really astute pieces of business in the transfer window. Liverpool have done it as well previously. Where they were, as Drew pointed out at the start of when Klopp came in, didn't look too great. There were people calling for Klopp to be sacked during the first kind of couple of years or so when he was there. And now he has gradually built them up. Arteta may not be the guy that does that for us. That none of us are going to sit here and say there are guarantees that if we stick with Arteta, things are going to get good. But what I think, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but what I think I can say is that I personally have seen things get better. I personally have seen things improve, not only on the pitch, but behind the scenes with the recruitment that we're doing, that over time, I hopefully will see that bearing fruit. Now, in a year's time, if again in the summer we add the same kind of quality players, the Gabriel Partey's, but in another centre mid position, maybe in a striking position, a right back possibly, whatever else on the pitch that we need to add to improve. If we do that, and in another year's time, we are still sitting here in the same league position, still being beaten in games, still not looking like we've got a clear identity, etc., etc., I think then is a more legitimate time to turn around and say, I don't think this is the right guy that is going to take us forward. But from what I've seen in a year, I personally feel that there are the building blocks of going to that next step. Drew, I saw you nodding along. Do you want to come in on this quickly?
Yeah, quickly. I know sometimes I hate the fact that Adam is always just sitting there like, well, what now? I feel bad.
He can speak up if he wants.
I'm going to speak for him because someone's got to do it. But I'll only be brief. And I know that probably Adam and French both want to say something.
This is
but
his
for
third
me,
show today, to be fair, Drew. So, you know.
yeah, he could be falling asleep. It's a very good point. For me, no, I think I know there's some stick about it, but people are mentioning the fact that if you look at our form since Christmas and we were not in form, we're fifth in the form table. I know that's a microcosm of what you want, but the fact is that it does show improvement after what was a period that a lot of the fan base did want Arteta to go, and it's turned around, and now we're top 5 in form. So you can't measure the season on being fifth in the form table post Christmas, but what you can say is that we at least have made those incremental increases, not just coming from an iffy period, from a shit period. We were 15th at the time, and now we've clawed up, and we're still maybe only sitting literally directly in mid-table, but I think things are. Yeah, exactly. But things are so much better than they were. And then now when you build off that, you have to say, well, I want to keep seeing that incremental increase for the rest of the season. It might not be enough to get us Europa League. I don't think it's going to get us Champions League, but if we can somehow claw back and finish, say, 7th or 8th, I think everyone would say, well, then you want to build off that at that point. Then you want to see the incremental changes for the season after that and say, well, next season Europa League is the minimum. We have to get top 5, top 6 next season. So that's how you want to look at it if you're considering Arteta's point. But I know that French or Adam might want to say something. So please.
Go on, Adam.
No, it's honestly, I think I'm worried that people will say that this is an echo chamber, because I find it uncanny that we all seem to agree, unless we're all hiding an opinion that we are scared to voice. Yeah, I can't believe that we all agree, and it doesn't seem that difficult. But the fact, wow, the fact that there are other fans that don't agree with what we're saying, even though it seems like the most sensible approach, just beggars belief to me. And I just find it fascinating that for people who, I don't really know you guys so well, and have no reason to just sit and agree with you, the fact that we can all come to a general consensus about what makes sense for Arsenal and that we are moving in the right direction, even if the results on the pitch don't support that, I just can't understand why nobody else can see it.
I don't know what quality of podcast you've been on there, Adam. This is a different caliber here.
I'm beginning to
no
offense to anyone.
I do. No, I just isolated 99% of the audience. Fantastic. I get I'm loving the fact that you use the word echo chamber, because I do sometimes feel that this place can be a little bit like that, and maybe it's me surrounding myself, and that's why I was so happy to get Dan Potts on the other day from Same Old Arsenal to talk to him, because he has a very kind of different viewpoint than me about things. So that was great getting Dan on. It is important to get different views, and that's why I often like to highlight in the chat box kind of comments that are different. I'm having a bit of a conversation with Yannick in the chat, and Yannick, of course, is genuinely one of my listeners in the chat and tunes in, and I know he tunes to other channels that I don't necessarily agree with, but he's always here and always putting his opinion across, even though it's different to my own, and I think that adds to the conversation. If you have got a different view, because obviously when we get onto the question stage, which is going to be in about 10 minutes or so, it would be good to have some questions that obviously kind of question where we are at, what we're talking about, the positions that we are putting out there. And I think that it's important to do those. Czech Perk in the chat says, and French, I'll target you with this. He says, do you honestly believe this team... You honestly believe the team hasn't improved? We were shocking 6 months ago. Granted, that was under Arteta. I think he's replying to someone else. But there was a comment from him earlier on, which I wanted to highlight, where he said, the improvement is obvious. Are you kidding? What improvements do you see in the team?
So from the start, when he first came in, we had a set of players some people called uncoachable, right? He made a lot of them look semi-decent, to the point that we missed Mustafi. I think it was in the FA Cup final. you know, we haven't got our best defender, Mustafi. Like, he straight away came in and addressed what Emery wasn't able to do, which was the defense. And for me, that was the biggest issue. And I think for most Arsenal fans would say that was a massive issue. And we've kind of almost forgotten it. Now we don't create enough. And that's a different problem, which is, to me, already a sign of improvement. You know, so we've solved the first problem. We've all right. We don't concede ridiculous 32 shots to Watford. Great. Then now we start to look up the pitch. All right, centre midfield's an issue. What do? We get a 50 million Partey. Hasn't played any games really this season. That's a real shame. And you wonder how that might look if he was there. You know, I'm not trying to make, like, you know, that's not an excuse to say that Arteta has been perfect in his other decisions, but still, that's a factor to take into account. Then you look at now, all right, so an issue was creating. We should play Mesut Ozil. Mesut Ozil needs to play. He hasn't had a goal or assist in 5 games at Fenerbahce, I'm hearing. So I think Arteta has probably been proved right there. People say, we should have another coach because another coach will take care of it. But would another coach be able to deal with the dressing room in the same way that Arteta's just come in and said, look, if you're not part of it, you get out? Granted, it's not perfect yet, but there's some things that Arteta could do. As Adam was saying, his remit is bigger. And now, okay, so we bring in Emile Smith-Rowe, and that's the Christmas point. It wasn't just like all of a sudden we started winning. It was a clear addition of a player that had clearly been missing, which is a number 10 or number 10 type of player. And as soon as he's there, all of a sudden now we're 5th in the form chart. So for me, the improvement is steady, but it's there. And I can see the problems are moving from defense to attack. And that's an improvement already in my eyes. And now I think we add more pieces to the puzzle. It starts to click. That's the hardest place of the pitch to operate well in the penalty box and scoring goals. It's the hardest thing to do in football. And once we get that, which was never going to be easy, I think, you know, then it's a sustainable, fully done rebuild. Well, yeah, a fully done rebuild. If we can defend well and attack well, then we're there. So I don't think we were ever going to be there overnight. But if we do get there under Arteta, then for me, that will be, I don't think anyone will be able to deny the improvement at that point.
But I think the issue, he comes back. He's just playing jokes. It's fine trying to leave and then come back and scaring us. It's fine. And I think the issue is, and I agree with what you're saying about the improvement, is I think when fans see the improvement, they expect it to that's how it is from now on. We're improving now. It has to be perfect every time. They don't expect there to be other speed bumps along the way. Improvement doesn't mean you go from 0 to 100 and stay at 100. It means you go from 0 to 50, and sometimes you'll drop back down to 35, but then you jump back up again. You know, it's more of like an actual kind of like a line graph in a way. You see more like this, kind of like a stock chart graph in a way. It's always going to be bouncing down until you get to where you really can be. So that's why, like in other hiccup matches that we've seen, you know, maybe if we're in our best possible entity, we win that match. But we're not at our best possible entity yet, so we might not win that match. We might get a draw, we might lose, whatever it might be. But so I think for me, that's just kind of like the one takeaway I was thinking about what you were saying was, and I agree. I think anyone who is thinking rationally can see the improvement. I think the fans that are the ones that are struggling with it, are the ones that it's that instant gratification kind of thing. And that's been mentioned. Yeah, that's been mentioned in other podcasts as well. It's like, I want it now, and this is how it needs to be immediately. But it's very, very rare when that happens.
The other thing to remember is how long have we not been great? Like, so there's a really good analogy for this, I think. There's a guy called David Goggins who's like this ultra marathon runner or whatever, and he talks about how he never stretched, and he did all these ultra marathons, and he did all these like he was a gym, he was a Navy SEAL, all these things. And then one day he just wasn't able to walk anymore. And then he ended up figuring out that the problem was stretching. And so he started to stretch. And as he started to stretch, right, he could walk, but then he had this pain now in his right ankle because for 20 years he'd been walking wrong. So he built up this other problem here. And so as you uncover the first problem, more problems come up because, and so you have to think, we've not been good for a while. There's a lot to uncover and to work through here. It was never going to be a season of, like, you know, our top 6 away record was terrible from like 2015 or something. We haven't beaten City since 2015, you know, in the league. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to be taking a while to work through, and then other things are going to come up. And I think naturally, as fans, we do forget that. And, you know, that's completely normal. But if you remember that puts everything into context.
My one more quick thing, and then I'll kind of mute myself again. But the thing that frustrates me the most is a lot of the criticisms come from people that have never actually coached at any serious level. People don't realize when you have a really big job ahead of you on multiple fronts, how long that actually takes. And what French just said is it's actually perfect. When you come into a new job, that's an absolute, like, it's just a dumpster fire on every conceivable level. You know, if you fix the defense, then you have to fix the attack. If you fix the attack first, you're probably still going to be leaking goals. Like, how do I implement my tactical ideas in a team that can't attack or defend? How do I implement them on just the defense? How do I implement them on just the attack? What do I need in midfielders? How do I train up my forwards to be the kind of forwards I want them to be? This is 50,000 things you have to do when you're coaching, when you come into a job that's an actual mess. So it's very, very rare when you take that mess and make it completely polished overnight. And that's why you look at something like the job that Klopp did and why was that ideal. And I hate the fact that we always have to reference Liverpool as the benchmark of how you want to operate, but they did do it correctly. You know, and he made incremental improvements year on year until they won Champions League and then they won the league. It took time, you know, and the people would have said, you know, well, if a manager like of Klopp's level and experience can't come in and fix a club like Liverpool overnight, then you cannot expect Arteta to do the same thing. You possibly can't. A man who has zero managerial experience before he took the job. And a lot of people say that that's why we shouldn't have given it to him. But the fact that he is making improvements that we've highlighted already shows you maybe that's why we should have given it to him. So
I just want to say, Drew doesn't think that you can't have an opinion just because you haven't coached. That's not what he's saying.
That's literally not what I'm saying.
I know that's what they're saying in the chat already, Drew.
This is why I don't read the chat, because I'm just going to get annoyed.
Go on, Adam.
I was just going to say, for anyone that doesn't think that improvements have been made, or who thinks that they can happen overnight, I would implore you to read Arsene Wenger's autobiography, because that really kind of changed my perspective, and I was able to see the sort of dearth of resources that he was working with at some of the other clubs he was at before Arsenal, and how even at Arsenal, when he mentioned the Champions League final loss, and he was like, it was really upsetting, but I try not to go one way in either direction, the highs or the lows. And I think that perspective is really good for where we are at right now, because it allows us to see that there is a brighter day coming, but we just can't get sucked into the mire of thinking, oh my gosh, this is the worst performance we've ever had. Or, oh my gosh, this is the best FA Cup win ever. So yeah, read that book. I guarantee it'll change your life.
Zamir in the chat raises a good, funny point that I really agree with, saying you can criticise Arteta if you want, and you can want him out if you want. Just be prepared to have Mertesacker take over rather than Allegri, Rodgers, and Simeone coming in. It's so true. You can be desperately wanting Arteta to go, but the thing is, these are the people that improved this guy, that appointed this guy that you want gone. Are you then trusting in them to make a decision that you want to happen? Sometimes for you people, it might be the better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And in this situation, when that devil is someone who I believe is making improvements to the team, and what really frustrates me sometimes is also when improvements are made. Like, I believe Saka is a player that has incredibly improved under Mikel Arteta's guidance. He's adding goals to his game, which he wasn't doing previously. He's becoming more direct. He's being more versatile. He's moved from that left-back role into a very fully flourished kind of wide man that can come inside and create havoc. And someone will just turn around and say, oh, well, that's just naturally developing. Like, he's going to get better, isn't he? And or like with Emile Smith-Rowe coming into the team, oh, well, there was COVID and injuries, so obviously Emile Smith-Rowe is going to come in. But it's even when there are good things, is that people are sometimes too blinkered to maybe admit, and that's what I really get frustrated with. And it's irrational. Like, I shouldn't get frustrated by these things. It shouldn't bother me, because there is going to be no pleasing some people, but you can't convince everyone. And that's genuinely something I really struggle with, and I shouldn't do. And even obviously having a Twitter account, for instance, has got a fair few followers that a lot of people reply to. I shouldn't reply to everyone. I know that, because I know everyone else that has a fairly sizable account definitely doesn't reply to the same amount of people that I do. Definitely doesn't. No matter who it is, I reply and continue the conversation on. And I end up going back and deleting that conversation, going, why did you do that, Tom? Like, why did you do that? And I think part of that is always going to come back to, like, some people aren't going to have their mind change. Some people aren't going to have their viewpoint moved, no matter what happens. Arteta could end up getting European football next season, and it will still be a case of, oh, well, it's not top 4. It's always not going to be enough. And it's frustrating, but it's the reality that we live in. I realise that we're eating into question time, so I want to get to that point. So if you've got questions, guys, in the chat, use the capital Q. We'll try and get as many of them as possible in the next 15 to 20 minutes. We might have gone a little bit longer. If any of you boys can't, please put it in the private chat and tell me that you can't go on a bit longer, and I'll do that. So let me know. But in the chat, Akene says, Tom, do you want to grow your channel? Do Arteta out for 2 months. See how it goes. Yeah. Could work, couldn't it? Could work. Tapas says, this is going to you, Adam. If Arteta has improved players, why are we 10th and why have we lost 11 games?
That can't be a real question. It can't be.
No, go on.
Okay.
Go.
Okay, fine.
Be free.
Well, I think it's evident that that certain players have improved. We've seen Granit Xhaka pass balls forward, like in the Liverpool game, for example, which was a major criticism. We saw Mustafi stop making mistakes, huge costly mistakes in big games, which I think French highlighted. So the reason that we're 10th or 11th is because the level of competition has increased. And I think that what was working for Arteta in the beginning is no longer working, because that is what happens in football. Teams evolve and they react to new challenges that they face. And I think Arteta, as a new coach, has taken his time to try and figure that out and react to the reaction. So I think it is something that will come good. And as I said, he doesn't just have the chance to work on stuff directly on the pitch anymore. His view is a bit broader than it was. So I think for all those reasons, Arsenal are currently sitting where they are on the table. But I would implore you once again to look at the performances of certain players and compare it to what it was like before. And I'm pretty sure you'll see an improvement. But maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Let me, again, I'm going to point out comments that are questioning what you're saying. So Yannick says, Adam, you see this is the problem. Everyone backing Arteta somehow tries to make the results seem irrelevant in, wait for it, a results-driven business. So feel free to respond.
Yeah, but he has got results though. Again, Yannick, we won the FA Cup against all odds. No one expected us to do that. So there's a result, a really big result for you. And yes, it hasn't been as successful this season, but I think I'm taking the rough with the smooth. I think he's done a good job and he's doing more than I would have even expected him to do at this moment in time, considering he is pretty much a novice manager. So maybe our expectations are just different and you still hold Arsenal in really, really high esteem. I probably still need to get to your level. Give me some time to get there. I promise you I will. But yeah, right now I think he's doing a half decent job. Sorry.
I think you answer it well. I think some people's kind of where they see the club is different. And by that standard are going to have different expectations to things. And I think that's completely fair. And I think also, Yanni, what I'd say is that you also have to have that understanding is that we will have different kind of mindset. And when we're trying to give these answers, it's about also trying to see that mindset and see the reasoning behind what we're saying. Like, I get what you're saying, Yannick. Football is a results-driven business. It really is. You're French. You look like you're about to murder someone. It's really like Mr. Burns level of.
That's how I always do. I know what you're talking about. No, yeah, I did want to jump in on that point though. It is a results-driven business, but we have to all right, look at who hired him, and what is the remit that was given to him and over what period of time. So the result to them obviously wasn't going to be win, do really well and get top 4 straight away and get top 4 the next season. So it is a results-driven business, but that doesn't mean that the people who hired him are judging him based off each result. The result might be over a longer period of time. Can he achieve this rebuild over X amount of time? So it is a results-driven business, but that doesn't mean every result is the be-all and end-all.
Exactly. Again, it's just spot on. I can't disagree with you. Mike says, at the wedding, can I request to sit next to Drew? You'll sit where I damn place you, Mike. That's where you're going to sit. Drew doesn't want to sit next to you. You can see it in his face. He doesn't want to sit next to you. That's how it's going to be.
I absolutely love Mike, but Mike will be drunk within 20 minutes, and I don't want that kind of.
I'm genuinely worried. I'm worried.
Mike, he's gonna want to cuddle at the table at the whole thing. So
I'm gonna have to have a word. Words are gonna have to be had. I'm hoping that if his other half's there, that she'll maybe temper him. But it's almost an impossible task. French Noah Wheeler says, if we get Odegaard in the summer, do we actually have a realistic chance of getting Erling Haaland? Oh
no.
I want me to give you a different question.
I don't want to do it.
Matt G says players with the biggest point to prove over the remainder of the season. How about that? Tackle that, French.
Ooh, players with the biggest point to prove over the rest of the season. I'd say Bellerin's probably got a pretty big point to prove. A lot of people, maybe not in the manager's eyes, I can't say, but I know in a lot of fans' eyes, people are looking at him like we want an upgrade there. I'm kind of in the camp, although I'm not in the camp of he's completely rubbish and he needs to be sold. Definitely, I just do think we need a better option, possibly. But he also has played a lot of games recently, and he's played because Tierney's been injured. Cedric's not been there to back him up for whatever reason. We got rid of Ainsley Maitland now, so we don't have any backup for him. So I am like, I think he's got a big point to prove. I'd say Martinelli, because he's got to fight for his place. And make himself a bit, more forward in the manager's thoughts. Maybe not as a starter for the rest of the season, but at least for a substitute ahead of Willian. I suppose Willian might be another one. I think people like Nketiah and Nelson are probably out of the door because we're not even seeing them on the bench. So I don't know if they'll be given a chance, but Drew disagrees.
No, I agree. I'm going to add Aubameyang to that list. And I'll tell you why. No. It's not because... I can already see the chat box like doing nonsense. But for me, it's not because of that he hasn't scored goals wherever he's been. It's because we just extended him, and now he has to prove that extension was the right move. Because you could argue that so far this season, people are already questioning if we should have done it because for the majority of the season he hasn't looked good. So whereas before he has, so for me that's a big one because if he's going to be hot and cold for the rest of the season, then a lot of people are going to ask, well, should we have just given this guy, what we just gave him for the amount we just gave him for a player who's already going to be 31 or however old he's going to be. So that's a big one for me as well, because if he's not, I'm just going to keep showing his inconsistency, then you have to then ask, and this is what you wrote about earlier, Tom, is do we have to look at actually bringing in another center forward? Because if he's not going to be consistent, we can't rely on him. So he has to prove that we can go back to relying on him. And if we can, perfect. If we can't, then that's another question we have to ask. So,
Adam, a question from Cookie Monster says, what level of manager do you believe Arteta is? Do you believe we should give him time and build a team around him because he was annoyed or because he is quality? I don't know what he means by annoyed.
Yeah, nor do I. I don't know. The truth is, I don't know. And I think that's kind of the exciting thing, that we get to see Arteta evolve as time goes on. And the good thing is that if it works out, I think he'll end up staying at Arsenal because I think we've given him all this power, and I don't see him getting that at many other clubs. So I believe if he works out and he's really good at Arsenal, he's going to stay because he loves the power and he wants to, continue doing what he was doing. Yes, I do think we should give Arteta time. I don't know how we build a team around Arteta, but we can build a team in his image because I believe that he would like to play football the right way. That's with technicians and highly skilled technical players and also solid defenders, which is stuff that we've lacked or not had the right balance of in recent years. So yes, I do think we should give Arteta time, and I do think we should build a team or squad in his image.
There's quite a few questions, Drew, about Martinelli in the chat. I'm just going to find a couple of them. Jashar says, is Arteta trying to do with Martinelli what Pep did with Foden when he kept holding him back? Even this season, Foden isn't a certain starter. And there was one other from David Keith, I think it was. You talk about Martinelli, but this kid is amazing and Arteta doesn't seem to rate him. Do you think Fergie would have dismissed Martinelli like Arteta is? French's face is just a picture. Go on, Drew.
Well, first, it's back. French, this is for you. The lights. There you go. I just say it just for him. Secondly, I don't know. Martinelli's a tricky one. I do feel like
I think he's been underplayed, personally.
I think he's been underplayed, but I also think that maybe Arteta just doesn't want to rely on too many young players. It could just be that simple. But then the question is, why isn't he rotating Martinelli again? That, for me, I think we all have questions with that. I would agree with you. I think, if you were going to rotate for City and focus on Benfica, then Martinelli probably should have started, at the weekend. And why hasn't he been playing since he's come back from injury? So I think there's a fine balance between protecting and inhibiting. And I think we're almost kind of at the point where we're maybe inhibiting and it's not protecting anymore, because you still need to give players time, little minutes. Training isn't enough, and Martinelli is at that age where he needs to be getting something. Do you know what I mean? So even before Foden truly broke in, he still got little niggling bites at minutes here and there. League Cup, maybe FA Cup. 10 minutes in the Champions League write-off match or whatever it might be. So that for me is that's the question for me. I don't think it's hard. And I saw Adam's face when the question came up about would Fergie have dismissed Martinelli. I don't think anyone's dismissing Martinelli. I just think, for me, I think it simply boils down to it's really hard to build something long-term, but also need enough currently where it relies on too many young players in the Premier League. No sides really, really do that. So even Chelsea thought they should be buying players when they had a decent young attack that got them Champions League last season. They still wanted to bring in a few more seasoned players than they already had. So, I think time will tell. But I think if he doesn't play for the rest of the season, then we could all kind of ask, what's going on with that. But we're not going to know for now. So,
French, you've got a theory on this?
Yeah, well, I've got a couple, but I think the most logical one is that he doesn't like playing Aubameyang and Martinelli at the same time. I think there's a couple of reasons why that might be. Obviously, they're both kind of low-touch players. It looks like, well, in the Benfica game, he got subbed on for Aubameyang, didn't he, in that striker position? So I'm wondering if he's starting to see Martinelli in the same way that I've hoped he would see him, which is as a striker. Which in that case, you kind of understand when Aubameyang's come back into the team and been in some decent form, he's going to get minutes. But the fact that he did bring on Martinelli in that Benfica game when we needed a goal in a European tie, to me says that he does still rate him and knows that he can pose a problem and be a goal scoring threat if he switched him with Aubameyang. So that's where my hope comes in. But I do think he's probably just trying to coach him more into his system. I think Martinelli's a bit of a terrier. He likes to run everywhere and he's got a lot of energy, but maybe, Arteta, we know he's into his structural discipline in a big way. And maybe he's just not kind of ticking all those boxes quite enough yet. But I do think he rates him and I think we'll be all right. And I think, next season we'll see him play more.
I agree with you. I see similarities with how Foden's being kind of handled at the moment. I think that I also like there's a comment about what Clive said. Clive at PAFC, Clive on Twitter. Where is the comment? It was a second. Here we go. Mikey says Clive has identified the fact that Martinelli is still very unstructured on the pitch and has a lot still to learn tactically. And I think that's spot on. I love the way, French, when you say the low touch players. These are low touch players. They're not the guys in the middle of the park with pulling all the strings. They're not Santi Cazulas, etc. And these guys aren't going to have too much time on the ball. But Martinelli does give you. He gives you that energy, that drive, that press, forces oppositions into mistakes, which is why I kind of thought he might be good for the Man City game, like he was against Man City in the quarterfinal of the League Cup. He was very good in that game at pressing and forcing their backline into errors, which got us that goal, ultimately, which he crossed into the box for Lacazette. So I thought he could have played in that game. It kind of leads into the next question as well, Adam, where Alexander Lawson says, are you concerned about Arteta's decision inconsistencies with some of his subs, player positioning and player picks?
A little bit, yes. I have to say, in my previous answer, I said that he's a novice or a rookie manager, and I think that's something that he needs to learn and learn quickly. I don't think luckily he'll be afforded more time than other managers at other clubs, but yeah, if he's not careful, people will start to jump on his back about his decisions, inconsistencies. That being said, I don't think he's been helped. I think his hand has been forced at certain times. So given a clean slate, given a fully fit squad, everyone that's performing, I think you'd start to see more consistent decisions. But he has been unlucky in certain respects. So give him time. I'm sure he'll come good. And yeah, he won't concern me anymore.
I agree with the question. There are things that I am certainly a little concerned about. None of the point of talking about Arteta, whilst I back the guy and I want to see him succeed, he isn't without fault. Like, this isn't a guy that is perfect and is making consistent, really good decisions. There are things that I find really strange, like why he brought Willian on instead of Ceballos for Partey against Aston Villa, why Martinelli didn't come on earlier against Benfica, why we didn't make any subs earlier against Benfica was a little strange, why he played Saka again for 90 minutes against City. Like, these are things I question, and I don't really know why. I'm sure it is part of the fact that he's still an inexperienced coach. And I know there's a couple of questions in the chat that say, why did we appoint an inexperienced coach? And I've kind of avoided those questions because it's a little bit irrelevant right now. Like, it's done. Like, we've appointed him. This is the situation that we're in. There's not much point really discussing that fact. All the thing to know about that is that they've done it once and they could appoint the wrong man, if you consider him the wrong man anyway. Again, it's very kind of, it's indicative of that, I suppose. Drew, Don Giovanni says, if it's a long-term process requiring patience, doesn't Arteta bear responsibility for signing Aubameyang and Aubameyang's new contract, signing Willian, rejecting offers for Bellerin, Maitland-Niles, Lacazette, Xhaka, Balogun, I don't know about Balogun, Eddie, knowing he needs to buy and sell?
Well, it's not just Arteta, it's Edu. So I think you can probably, divert that question to the overall, makeup of the management team, for lack of a better term. But in certain ways, yeah, it certainly does seem like Arteta has maybe questionable faith that Willian is going to come good at some point, even though the whole stick was we're trying to sign a player who can come in and hit the ground running, even though he didn't hit anything other than a wall. So it's kind of a little bit confusing. I think he should also bear responsibility for Aubameyang but I also think that maybe the club's hands are tied. Things that happened with constantly letting our best players go. Aubameyang at that point did perform. So maybe the club felt like they had to re-sign him, or else the fans were, it was going to be bedlam if we didn't. I don't know. But yeah, I think it falls on him and Edu. I think any personnel decision currently and moving forward does fall on him and Edu, because Arteta does have a say that's been made clear. He doesn't have the say; he has a part of the say. Edu has another part of the say, and then Josh will have some part of the say as well. I think so. I think the jury's out on most of that. I think maybe what Arteta truly wanted to do is why he did something like not let Maitland-Niles go, why he wanted to maybe try to convince Balogun to stay, why Nketiah is still here. I think it's because he wanted a full season to really evaluate all of these players to see if maybe they can be rehabilitated, because he's shown the ability to rehab players. I don't think he's willing to give up on things just yet. He only had his job the first 6 months was trying to right the ship, because at that point it was also kind of a mess. So it's hard to evaluate what you have and maybe what you want to do in your image, like Adam was saying, when you're so busy trying to wipe the slate clean so you can start actually trying to look at things in your image. I think he wanted to view those players through that lens, and then I think maybe now it'll be telling to some extent. I do think a lot of those players will probably leave. I do think Nketiah will leave. I do think Maitland-Niles will leave. I do think if a big offer came in for Bellerin, I wouldn't be surprised if we took it, because I think maybe in the long term, if you could ask anybody if they would get a good chunk of change for him, would you then reinvest it in someone who is younger and maybe more suited to what Arteta wants to do with an underlapping right wing back, which I don't think Bellerin. I think he can't do it because he was a winger, when he came to La Masia. But I think you want someone who's a bit more tidy on the ball, a bit more creative maybe in that role, and it's not him. I don't think it's Cedric either. So yeah, I think moving forward, you have to look at Arteta and Eddie for those. But we don't know where that's going to end up yet. They all could come good, they all could not. It could be 50-50. We don't know. So
I do want to come in on this question, just to kind of give some of my views on it. one of the things that I look at, and I know I touched on this in the Raw Reaction show yesterday, but I want to bring it up again because what I notice about Arteta is what he's done in the summer window and the January window as well. You look at like who we actually spent big money on, which was 2 players. That was what Arsenal were capable of doing in the window. I'm sure if they'd have had more money, they would have gone out and done more. But with the money that they had, which they had to get additional funds from the ownership to get Partey done, was Partey and Gabriel. The other signings that we made were Willian and Runarsson. Now, Willian cost us the signing on fee over whatever period of time and his wages, which obviously are also spread over a period of time. Arteta clearly wanted to bring someone in to give competition to Pepe, a player that he didn't sign and a player that he certainly would have had a lot of questions about. And I don't think anyone, no matter what you think of Willian, no matter what you think of Arteta or the club or Chelsea or whatever, I don't think anyone expected Willian to be as poor as he has been this season, because he was in the top 10 chance creators in the Premier League last season. And Arsenal were devoid of creativity. So bringing in someone who is in that top 10 and is transitioning by going from one London club to another, it's not a big deal transitioning from one team in the Premier League to another that are around, in and around the same sort of level in the league. It's not too much of an issue. But he hasn't performed, and he's been let down by that. Aubameyang's contract, in hindsight, I disagree with, because I think a lot of good points have been raised about the fact that we gave it to a player that did things for us, not necessarily a player that's going to do things for us, and he's going to gradually regress over the next couple of years. But of a club that was very restricted financially in a pandemic, how are you going to sell Aubameyang with a year left on his deal to anyone? And how are you going to get anyone close to the quality that he does have, that we know he has? You're never going to be able to replace that, realistically. And we needed to spend money on a centre-back and a centre midfielder. Runarsson came in as a goalkeeper that was meant to be third choice. And we had 2 very good goalkeepers. And arguably, maybe one of Gabriel or Partey doesn't happen if we don't sell one of our 2 first-team keepers. Maybe that doesn't happen because of how restricted we were. I think people like to turn around and say that anyone saying the pandemic happening is an excuse. It isn't an excuse because it affects some clubs differently. You look at how much Chelsea were able to spend. You look at what City are able to do. They're just different. They're just different clubs that are in different leagues to us. Liverpool have been what did Liverpool spend in the summer window? They bought Thiago in, and then this January window, they've got Kabak in on loan with an option to buy, because they've had to be savvy as well. And then you look at January as well, what we've done in January. How many people have been crying out for people to get rid of the deadwood at the club? For so long, we've been desperate for someone to move on Ozil, move on Mustafi, move on Socrates and Kolasinac, and get these players that are not of Arsenal standard out. And we've done that. And not only that, we were able to get in one of the kind of the hottest prospects and considered at one point genuinely one of the most exciting talents in Europe in on loan, with even the possibility of having a conversation with someone about keeping him. And we brought in very good Premier League quality cover, a goalkeeper as well. There's been mistakes. Saliba is a huge mistake, a massive mistake, and we cocked that up. We really, really did. But I'm not going to crucify Arteta specifically on something which I think is also to do with the club, not just specifically him with how we handled the Saliba situation. And it does not necessarily mean that Saliba doesn't come back at the end of the season after a really solid loan at Nice and integrate straight back into the team. Football happens so quickly. Players do return, and after looking like they aren't going to play again, and then do play, and then do really well. You've seen it at loads of clubs. Players do it. So it's not the end of the road for him. I think that there are so many good things that we have done. And I think that in comparison to what was before, which was, for me, Unai Emery, a man that made a hell of a lot of mistakes, that is a good coach. Don't get me wrong. He wasn't able to communicate his ideas, really. And I think that's why you're seeing him do a lot better at a place like Villarreal, where he's able to communicate what he wants so much better. But he made a lot of mistakes himself too. He completely lost the dressing room. He got to a point where Arteta got around October and had lost the squad, and there was a point of no return. We now know that wasn't the same for Arteta with how we turned things around going into the new year and how we got back after Chelsea, etc. So, and I can't forgive the end of the full season that he had when he cost us top 4. I can't let that go. I just can't. The rotation for me in Crystal Palace and Brighton, I'll never forgive. But I just see what's going on with Arteta. I see what's there, and I just think that in a year's time, we're in a much better position to make a judgment. I know that people want us to be top 4. I know people want us to be title contenders. In a world that is just what it is right now, it's not going to happen. And also what you have to factor in is that the Premier League is a joke how good it is. I remember sitting here 5 years ago, harking on about how much I loved La Liga and saying La Liga is the best league in the world. The Premier League is far and away the best league in the world by a distance in terms of quality now because of how good so many of the teams are, which is great in terms of the Premier League, but sucks for us. Really sucks for Arsenal. Because you've got teams like Aston Villa that have spent 250 million quid over the last 2 or 3 years, and Leicester that are recruiting expertly, and Liverpool that are doing really well, and Chelsea that can go out and spend 200 million. The Man United can go out and get Bruno Fernandes, etc. And then you've got City, who are just City. And Everton that have got a very good coaching and have decided to go down the route this season of bringing in players that are in their prime, that are performing in their prime, but don't have a very high ceiling. And they're getting quick wins out of that. But as Drew touched on earlier, the longevity of those quick wins will probably be realised quite quickly. I'm seeing private messages, so Drew, I'm not reading that message out. Deary me. I'm going to ask a couple more questions before we wrap up to you guys. We'll go one more question each from the chat box. French, Anthony Michael says, if our 5 biggest leaders are Xhaka, Luiz, Holding, Lacazette and Bellerin, which I'm trying to think of anyone else who might be a leader. Tierney, I'd argue, is definitely one of them. What should we realistically expect from them? Say again, sorry?
Well, saying Aubameyang is our captain. It's a bit mad that he's not been mentioned, but
yeah,
whatever.
But I saw a question earlier on. I think it may have been Anthony that was asking it. It was saying that, like, if you were to kind of name our top 5 leaders in the team, and then once you've identified those 5, how many of them would you want to move on and upgrade upon? It's quite interesting because I'd say that Xhaka is one of those, but I'd move him on and I'd get something better.
Yeah, I'd get rid of him. So, that's kind of a moot point, isn't it?
So then he says, then what should we realistically expect for a league position going forwards this season, really?
Well, I think Drew's touched on it. For this season, I mean, yeah, realistically, a 7th is a clear improvement on 10th. I don't know if it's something that the fans would be happy with, but I'd say from where we were to get 7th, we'd probably have to play some sort of decent level of football. And hopefully it would be within the system that we've started to see, which means that we'd be creating more attack and to see that click more. I think it doesn't really matter in terms of his job position for this season. But it does matter in terms of, I think, just trying to build some confidence with the fans and trying to build up momentum for next season, possibly with some of the players as well. So yeah, I'll go with what Drew said, to be honest. Probably it feels really weird and bad to say, but yeah, probably like a 7th or something. 8th.
Okay.
7th.
Yeah. Let's find Jashar Josiah says, Drew, did we need the £120 million loan to pay off the contracts of the January leavers? If not, why didn't we pay them at all? I mean, how much do you know about the January loan? Because I know it was nothing to do with transfers. That's all I know. It was absolutely nothing to do with it.
No, it had nothing to do with transfers. Like, it was reported by multiple sources, I think, that it had to do with just covering costs for the rest of the season because we're in COVID, because we have no match day revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, as far as
Spurs
I'm aware,
did £175 million loan, I believe, last year.
Spurs did a bigger one. There were some other clubs that were thinking about doing the same. So it's not just Arsenal. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it has next to nothing to do with
okay, I'll ask you a fairer question. Thomas from Norway says, maybe the Arteta hate is simply down to one thing. The manager is the only thing that we can change right now. Would you make
that's a fair question? I mean, that's a fair point to make. And I mean, obviously, you always look at when things aren't going well. You always look at the central figure, and the central figure is always leadership, whether it be the manager or the director of football or ownership, whoever it might be. So yeah, Arteta's going to bear the brunt of a lot of things that go wrong right now, rightly or wrongly, depending on what it is. But I think also I do feel like the hate comes from a position where I think just a lot of people just didn't want him, so they're just not prepared to have their minds changed. And we touched on this earlier, that when people don't get what they want, it's like they dig their heels in even more, and they'd rather have that hill to die on rather than allowing themselves to think through a different lens. You know what I mean? And we all get that way. You get that way. I get that way French gets away. You see our WhatsApp group, for fuck's sake. Like, how many bickering matches do we have in WhatsApp because of all of us digging our heels in on certain things? And sometimes you just don't want to be wrong, and you'd rather wait and hope you're proven right instead of having your mind changed. So I think that's where a lot of the hate comes from as well. I think a lot of fans wanted someone like Ancelotti to come in. So now they're constantly looking at, oh, look at Everton under Ancelotti. But as you just said in the chat before, it's a very different scenario at Everton than it is at Arsenal right now. If Ancelotti comes in here, there's no guarantee that he would have had the same effect on Arsenal that he's having on Everton at the moment. And I don't think he would have, to be fair, because again, it's two different jobs. So I think that's where I think a lot didn't want him. A lot wanted more experience, and they view his hiring as the club accepting that we're not big enough to get a bigger manager, and I think they can't come to terms with that, or it's just that they didn't want him in the first place, and they just don't want to have their minds changed. So
French wanted to come in.
Yeah, the previous question by I think it was Josiah something. What he said at the end of that was, if it wasn't to do with the transfers, then why didn't we get rid of them in the summer? And I just wanted to quickly say, I mean, you have to agree with the players. You can't just pay them off and just say, get out of the club. There has to be some sort of agreement with the player to say, right, we're going to work this out. I'm going to leave. And I think a big part of the kind of ostracization of players like Ozil was to achieve just that, to make sure that certain players know they're not going to be a part if they're not, on board. And I think, people call it the German clique, Kolasinac, Socrates, Mustafi all went with Ozil. And so I think that all kind of came together, and it wasn't saying that we could just click our fingers and do in summer. It had to take a bit of time.
Final question is going to come from this is Ibrahim. It's about transfers, Adam, to finish off the show. It says, realistically, how many additions do you think we will make this summer? I mean, at least it doesn't ask you for any names. That's the good thing.
I don't know. Ibrahim. I would probably start with the right back, left back situation. I think Arteta will see that and agree with me. If you're watching Arteta, do it. I also think that he'll obviously do something about the midfield area. And I can see possibly 2 additions there, because number 1, we'll be losing Dani Ceballos. Number 2, we'll be losing Martin Odegaard. So yeah, I think it will probably at least 1, possibly 2. So that's 3 in total. And if Arteta is smart, he'll probably get a striker, because Lacazette will be in his last year of contract. Aubameyang,
yeah, if you sell him, if we're smart, really.
Yeah. So yeah, I think realistically it should be about 4. But I mean, your guess is as good as mine, so I don't know. Maybe 10. Who knows?
Yeah. 10 would be great. 10 would be lovely. I'd love 10 signings. That'd be wonderful. It's been to be fair, it's been a very enjoyable show to kind of talk through things and have a good discussion about things, as always. We do like to entertain different opinions, as we have done, and ask the questions, and hoping these guys have answered those questions for you. If you are still feeling that we haven't answered those, and you want to understand a little bit more why I specifically are kind of still backing the manager, there are shows on the channel that you can find which explain that in the last week or so. But I'd like to thank my fantastic panel and chat box. If you could show some love to my 3 fantastic guests. First of all, thank you to French. Appreciate your time, mate. Tell people where they can find you, son.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, guys. Up French Guna 23, and yeah, make sure you get the likes on the video, man.
Cheers, mate. If you could drop a like, that'd be great. Even if you haven't agreed with us, the whole point is about different opinions. So I'd appreciate if you could drop a like. Drew, always a pleasure, brother. Appreciate your time, pal.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find French in the lake outside my house, just over there.
Just fishing away.
No, but you can.
Oh wait, that's not
even
right. It's like spears.
No, but you. Thanks for having me. It was great to talk to you boys again, as always. You can just find me at Logic Player on Twitter. That's it. Yeah, and then anything I do or write or podcast about, it's always just on my Twitter anyway. So there you go.
There you go. And you'll also be able to join Drew on Jess's new show on You At My Arsenal. So make sure you check out their new podcast. What?
It's Yana's new show.
Yes, but you are like cultivating it with them. Is that the right word?
It's just myself and Luke. I know a lot of people don't know who Luke is. Luke's been at Yama for quite a while. He's another writer there. So it's the three of us. And sometimes, Michael, we're doing a twice weekly podcast for your rights. So we do Friday episodes and then Monday morning episodes. So yeah, look out for that as well. It's just starting. We've only done 2, but yeah, it'd be great to have you guys all listen when you can as well. So.
I was just in a funny comment saying Daniel Roberts saying, Tom, you need to hang some of your pictures up. Yeah, there's 3 just sitting on the windowsill at the moment, and there's a lot of white space there that I do need to fill, to be fair. I'll get on that, Dan. Sorry that you're now redesigning my house. Adam, appreciate your time as always, mate.
No problem, man. Yeah, you can find me at TFO Show or on the Football Terrace. Yeah, and I really enjoyed it as well. I thought it was great. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. My absolute pleasure. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Actually, I can tell you who is going to be on with me from my schedule, which I'll be sending out to the boys for the March bookings very, very shortly in a couple of days' time. It's Owen. Owen's going to be joining me tomorrow, so that should be fun. And we always try to have a guest on every Tuesday, and then on Fridays, it's just me having a chat with you all. And I was really happy because Dan in the chat, Daniel Robert, who was telling me to redesign my house, won the signed Dennis Bergkamp shirt on Friday, which is absolutely awesome. Sorry, what Dan? Sorry, Jared Carver won it, but Dan won the Aubameyang signed photo montage the week before. So we're back-to-back winners right now, which is absolutely great. If you haven't checked out the other shows that have been on this evening, please do. Jess was streaming earlier on. Same Old Arsenal was on, of course, with Craig and his gang, and Highbury Squad was on too. There was plenty of stuff, and I'm sure the Gooners Pod will be back a little bit later on this evening. I think they're on at 10 in 5 minutes, so you go check them out. Please do. But before you do, please drop a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please give everybody a follow, including ourselves at the Gooners Talk TV and at Tom Cantor Media. I'll see you again tomorrow at 5 p.m. And as always, up the Arsenal.